The text message she sent was brutal in its honesty. I don't want to go to a rooftop restaurant with champagne and city lights. I'm exhausted from pretending those things make me happy. And if you actually want to spend time with me, you'll come over and we'll eat whatever's in my fridge. Lily Reeves hit send before she could second-guess herself, then dropped her phone on the couch and stared at her apartment ceiling, wondering if she'd just torpedoed what might have been a perfectly nice evening with a man who seemed genuinely interested. But the truth was, she couldn't stomach another date where she had to dress up like someone else, sit across from a stranger in some expensive place, and pretend the performance of romance was the same as actual connection. She was 24, working 3 jobs to keep her studio apartment, and she was so tired of men who thought throwing money at her would make her swoon. Her phone buzzed. She expected a polite decline, maybe some passive-aggressive comment about her lack of appreciation for the finer things. Instead, "I'll be there in 20 minutes." Lily sat up, staring at the screen. Erasmus Falomir had been pursuing her for 2 weeks with the kind of patient intensity that should have been unnerving, but somehow wasn't. They'd met at the art gallery where she worked part-time, him standing in front of a painting she'd been studying during her lunch break. And when he'd asked her what she saw in it, she'd told him the truth instead of the rehearsed gallery script. He'd listened like every word mattered. He was tall, impossibly handsome in a way that seemed almost unreal, with white blonde hair that fell past his shoulders and skin so pale it looked like porcelain. His eyes were dark amber, nearly gold, and when he looked at her she felt like he could see straight through to her bones. He'd asked her to dinner that same day. She'd said no. He'd come back the next week and asked again, this time suggesting a concert at the symphony. She'd declined. The third time, he'd offered the rooftop restaurant, and something in his voice, the genuine hope threading through his formal politeness, had made her say yes before she could stop herself. And now she'd told him to come to her cramped studio apartment instead of the 5-star date he'd planned, and he was actually coming. She looked around her space with fresh panic. It wasn't messy exactly, but it was small and worn, the kind of place that showed every crack in the plaster and every water stain on the ceiling. Her furniture was second-hand, mismatched, held together with hope and wood glue. The kitchen was barely big enough to turn around in, just a hot plate, a mini fridge, and a microwave she'd found on the curb. This was what she had. This was who she was. If he was going to judge her for it, better to know now. 20 minutes later, exactly as promised, there was a knock at her door. Lily opened it to find Erasmus standing in the hallway, looking like something out of a Gothic painting, wearing an elegant black coat that probably cost more than her rent and holding a bottle of wine that she suspected was older than her grandmother. He looked at her, taking in her leggings and oversized sweater, her bare feet and her hair pulled into a messy knot, and something softened in his expression. "You meant it," he said, and there was wonder in his voice. "I usually do." She stepped aside to let him in, watching as he ducked slightly through the doorway. He was taller than she'd remembered, and the space seemed to shrink around him, his presence filling every corner. "I should warn you, my kitchen isn't exactly equipped for fancy meals." Erasmus looked around her apartment with an expression she couldn't quite read, his gaze traveling over her second-hand bookshelf stuffed with paperbacks, her grandmother's quilt draped over the sagging couch, the string lights she'd hung to hide the worst of the water stains. "It's perfect," he said quietly. And the strange thing was, he sounded like he meant it. "It's a shoebox," Lily corrected, closing the door. "But it's mine." He turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "You have no idea how refreshing that is." She had no response to that, so she walked to the kitchen and opened her mini fridge, peering inside at the sparse contents. "I have cheese, bread, butter, and some grape jelly that's probably expired. Also half a container of leftover Chinese food, but I don't recommend it." When she turned around, Erasmus was right behind her, having moved with a silence that should have been impossible for someone his size. He was looking at her fridge with the fascination of someone encountering an alien artifact. "Grilled cheese?" he asked, the words uncertain, like he was testing out a foreign language. "You've never had grilled cheese." "I've never made grilled cheese," he said carefully. "I've never made anything, actually." Lily stared at him. "What do you mean you've never made anything? Like, you don't cook?" "I have people who handle that." He said it without arrogance, just simple fact, but Lily felt a laugh bubble up in her chest. Of course you do. Let me guess. You also have people who lay out your clothes and start your car and probably brush your teeth for you. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. I draw the line at teeth brushing. How generous of you. She pulled out the cheese and butter, setting them on the tiny counter. All right, Your Majesty, tonight you're going to learn how the other half lives. Find a pan under the stove. She expected him to balk, to suggest they order takeout from some expensive place instead, but Erasmus shed his coat, draped it carefully over her single kitchen chair, and knelt to examine the cabinet under her hot plate. He emerged with a battered frying pan, holding it like it might explode. This? That's the one. Lily pulled out the bread, trying not to laugh at the sight of this impossibly elegant man crouching in her kitchen like he was on an archaeological dig. Put it on the heat medium-low. Do you know what medium-low is? I'm a quick study. She talked him through it, step by step, watching as he carefully buttered the bread with the intense concentration of someone diffusing a bomb. His movements were precise, controlled, but there was something endearing about the way he kept glancing at her for confirmation, like he was afraid of making a mistake. When he laid the first slice of bread in the pan, butter side down, he looked absurdly pleased with himself. Now the cheese, Lily instructed, handing him a slice. Erasmus placed it on the bread, with the care of someone handling museum artifacts. How much? However much you want. It's grilled cheese, not surgery. Everything should be done properly, he said, but there was a hint of amusement in his voice now. He added another slice of cheese, then carefully placed the second piece of bread on top, butter side up. The bread began to sizzle in the pan, and the smell of butter and toasting bread filled the small kitchen. You have to flip it, Lily said, leaning against the counter. Otherwise it'll burn on one side. Erasmus searched for a spatula, found the one plastic one she owned, and attempted to flip the sandwich. It stuck to the pan, cheese beginning to ooze out the sides, and when he finally got it turned over, the bread was definitely more dark brown than golden. He stared at it with the expression of someone who'd just failed an important test. It's burning, he said, sounding genuinely distressed. It's fine. A little char builds character. Lily reached over and turned down the heat. Their hands brushed and she felt something electric run up her arm, a warmth that had nothing to do with the hot plate. Erasmus went very still, his attention shifting from the sandwich to her, and for a moment the whole world narrowed to the space between them, the tiny kitchen feeling even smaller. You're not what I expected, he said softly. What did you expect? Someone who wanted what I could give her. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. Someone who would be impressed by the surface of things. I've been poor my whole life, Lily said, meeting his eyes. I know the difference between what glitters and what's actually gold. Something shifted in his expression, a kind of hunger that had nothing to do with food. He opened his mouth to respond, then seemed to remember the sandwich and quickly pulled it off the heat. The bread was definitely burnt on one side, the cheese had leaked out and solidified on the pan, and it looked absolutely nothing like the perfectly golden sandwiches in commercials. Erasmus stared at his creation with obvious dismay. I've ruined it. You've given it personality. Lily found a plate and took the sandwich from him, cutting it in half with a knife. The cheese stretched between the pieces, and despite the burnt bits, it looked perfectly edible. She handed him half. Your first grilled cheese. He took it cautiously, examining it from all angles like it might contain hidden dangers, then took a bite. His eyes widened slightly. He chewed slowly, thoughtfully, and then something remarkable happened. Erasmus Falomir, this man who carried himself like walking royalty, who probably ate at Michelin-starred restaurants and had never touched a frying pan in his life, smiled. Really smiled, not the polite expression he'd worn at the gallery, but something genuine and unguarded. It's terrible, he said. It's burnt, Lily agreed, taking a bite of her own half. He was right, it was terrible. But somehow that made it better. I've eaten at the finest establishments in the world, Erasmus continued, still holding his half-eaten sandwich like it was treasure. And this is the most satisfying thing I've had in years. You're either lying or you have incredibly low standards. I'm not lying. He took another bite and she watched his face, the way his expression softened with each chew. I've never made anything before. I never understood that it would feel like this. Like what? Like accomplishment, like I actually did something that mattered, even if it's small. He finished the sandwich and looked at her with those impossible amber eyes, and Lily felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. Can we make another? They made 3 more sandwiches, each one progressively less burnt as Erasmus got the hang of the timing and the heat. Lily found herself laughing as he narrated the process like a sports commentator, his formal way of speaking making even the simplest steps sound absurdly important. The cheese is achieving optimal melt consistency, he announced gravely, and she nearly choked on her water. You're ridiculous, she said, but she was grinning. I'm focused. He flipped the sandwich with a flourish, and this time it was actually golden brown on both sides. He looked so proud that Lily couldn't help but laugh again. And then he was laughing too, a deep, rich sound that filled her small apartment and made something warm bloom in her chest. They ate the sandwiches on her couch, sitting close together because there wasn't really room to spread out, and Lily found herself telling him things she usually kept locked away. About growing up with a single mother who worked herself to exhaustion, about putting herself through community college while working full-time, about her dreams of maybe, someday, having enough money to feel secure. Erasmus listened with the same intense attention he'd given the grilled cheese, asking questions that showed he was actually hearing her, not just waiting for his turn to talk. What about you? She asked when she'd run out of stories. What do you do when you're not pursuing women who reject you repeatedly? His expression turned careful, guarded in a way it hadn't been all evening. I run a rather large organization. It requires most of my time. What kind of organization? The kind with a great deal of politics and very little joy. He said it lightly, but there was something heavy underneath the words. I've been doing it for a very long time, and somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to do something simple. To make something with my own hands. To laugh without worrying about who's watching or what it means for my position. Lily studied him, this strange, beautiful man who talked like he'd stepped out of another century and looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing in the world. How long is a very long time? Erasmus met her gaze, and she saw him weighing something, deciding. Longer than you'd believe. Try me. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said carefully, What do you know about vampires, Lily? Her first instinct was to laugh, but something in his expression stopped her. He was absolutely serious, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Like Dracula? Twilight? Interview with a vampire? Like the creatures that have existed alongside humanity since the beginning, hidden in the spaces between your notice. His voice was soft, steady. Like the beings who built courts and kingdoms in the shadows, who made laws and waged wars while your history books looked the other way. Lily's mouth went dry. She should have been laughing, or edging toward the door, or reaching for her phone to call someone, but instead, she found herself thinking about all the little things that hadn't quite added up. The way he moved too quietly, too gracefully. The way his skin was so pale, it seemed to glow in the light from her string bulbs. The way he'd talked about eating at the finest establishments in the world, like he'd had centuries to do it. You're telling me you're a vampire, she said slowly. I'm telling you, I'm the vampire king. He said it simply, like he was telling her his job title, which she supposed he was. I rule the largest court in the Western Hemisphere. I've been alive for 643 years, and I've never wanted anything the way I want to keep sitting on this couch with you, eating burnt sandwiches and listening to you talk. She should have run. Every survival instinct she had was screaming that this was insane, impossible, dangerous. But Lily had spent her whole life trusting her gut, and her gut was telling her that Erasmus Falomir, vampire king, impossibly old and powerful being, was telling her the truth. More than that, he was trusting her with it. Prove it, she said. He blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Prove it? You're a vampire, show me. Erasmus studied her for a long moment, then slowly smiled, and this time she saw the fangs, delicate and sharp, extending just slightly past his other teeth. Her breath caught, but she didn't move away. He raised one hand and moved it faster than her eyes could track, suddenly holding the book she'd left on the far end of the coffee table. Then he was back in his original position, as if he'd never moved. We're faster than humans can perceive, he said quietly. Stronger too. We heal almost instantly from most wounds. We don't age. And yes, we drink blood, though we've developed systems to do so without harming the unwilling. Lily's mind was racing, trying to process this, trying to fit it into her understanding of the world. The sunlight thing? Very real. It burns, badly. I'll be trapped here until sunset tomorrow, actually. He said it casually, but she caught the vulnerability underneath. He'd come to her apartment knowing he wouldn't be able to leave until dark, trusting that she wouldn't betray him while he was weakened. And you're a king. I rule the Night Court of the Americas. There are 6 major courts worldwide, and mine is the second largest. It's a position I inherited through bloodline and conquest, and one I've held for 3 centuries. He was watching her carefully, trying to gauge her reaction. I live in a palace underground, beneath this city. I have advisors and guards and servants and courtiers, all of them playing eternal games of status and power. I attend meetings that last for days and negotiate treaties with beings older than human civilization, and I am so unspeakably tired of all of it. The raw honesty in his voice made her chest ache. Is that why you kept asking me out? Because I'm different from your usual world? I kept asking you out because when you looked at that painting and told me you saw loneliness in the brushstrokes, I realized I'd found someone who actually sees things clearly. He shifted closer, and she could feel the coolness of him, the way his presence seemed to draw the warmth from the air. Everyone in my world wants something from me. Power, favor, protection, status. You didn't even want me to buy you dinner. I'm still not sure I want you to buy me dinner, Lily said, but her voice came out softer than she intended. Good. Erasmus reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were cool against her skin, gentle. I don't want to buy you, Lily. I want to know you. I want to make you terrible grilled cheese and hear you laugh. I want to sit in your small, perfect apartment and remember what it feels like to be someone other than the king. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. This is insane. Completely. You're a vampire. I am. And you rule an entire court of vampires. One of the largest in the world, yes. Lily took a breath, looking at this impossible man with his white hair and amber eyes, and the kind of loneliness she recognized because she'd seen it in her own mirror. Make me another grilled cheese, she said. Erasmus blinked. What? You heard me. Make me another grilled cheese. If I'm going to have a vampire king in my apartment until sunset, he might as well be useful. The smile that spread across his face was radiant, unguarded, and absolutely beautiful. As you wish. They stayed up talking until dawn started to gray the windows, and Lily watched Erasmus move carefully away from the light, positioning himself in the corner of her apartment that would stay shadowed. She closed the curtains, the blackout ones she'd bought to sleep during the day when she worked night shifts, and the relief on his face was palpable. Thank you, he said quietly. Can't have the vampire king bursting into flames in my living room. The deposit's bad enough as it is. He laughed, and the sound filled her apartment like music. They made a nest of blankets on the couch and kept talking, Lily asking him about his life, the things he'd seen, the history he'd lived through. Erasmus told her about the Night Court, about vampire politics and the strange beauty of a society that moved in darkness. He told her about the weight of the crown, the constant vigilance required to hold power among beings who saw time differently than humans, who played games that lasted decades. Don't you have people who'll miss you? Lily asked, curled against his side. He was cool to the touch, but not uncomfortably so, and there was something soothing about his presence. Undoubtedly. They'll assume I'm handling some private matter. His arm was around her shoulders, careful but secure. I'm allowed some mysteries, even from my court. What happens when they find out about me? He went still. What makes you think they'll find out? Because I'm not an idiot, Erasmus. You're a king. Kings don't get to keep secrets forever. She tilted her head to look up at him. What happens when your court discovers you've been spending time with a human who lives in a studio apartment and makes minimum wage? His expression hardened, something regal and dangerous sliding into place. Then they'll learn that their king makes his own choices. Will they try to hurt me? He met her eyes, and there was something fierce in his gaze, protective and absolute. I would burn the court to ash before I let anyone harm you. The intensity of it should have scared her, But instead, Lily felt safe, safer than she'd felt in years. That seems dramatic. I'm a 600-year-old vampire king. We don't do anything by halves. But his voice softened and he pulled her closer. Sleep, Lily. I'll keep watch. She wanted to argue, wanted to stay awake and keep talking, but exhaustion was pulling at her and his presence was so steady, so solid. Lily let herself drift off with her head on his shoulder, trusting this impossible being to keep her safe. When she woke, it was late afternoon, the light outside her windows deep gold. Erasmus was exactly where she'd left him, sitting perfectly still, watching her with those amber eyes. You didn't sleep, she said, her voice rough. I don't need to, not the way you do, and I wanted to watch you. That's creepy. That's honest. He touched her face, fingers tracing her cheekbone. You're beautiful when you sleep. You're beautiful when you're awake. You're beautiful when you're telling me I'm ridiculous for not knowing how to make grilled cheese. Lily felt heat rise in her cheeks. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Because I'm not used to it. Because it makes my brain short-circuit. She sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair. I need coffee. I'll make it. You don't know how to make coffee. You'll teach me. He was already standing, moving to her tiny kitchen. Everything I know about cooking, I learned from you in the last 12 hours. I'm an excellent student. She talked him through the process of her ancient coffee maker, watching as he measured grounds with the same intense focus he'd given the grilled cheese. When the coffee was finally ready, he poured her a cup, added the exact amount of milk and sugar she liked without asking, and handed it to her like he was presenting a crown jewel. How did you know how I take my coffee? Lily asked, accepting the mug. I watched you make it yesterday before you texted me. You were standing at the gallery's back counter during your break. He said it casually, but there was something vulnerable in the admission. I've been watching you for longer than 2 weeks, Lily. I've been coming to the gallery for months, timing my visits to when you'd be working, trying to work up the courage to speak to you. The Vampire King needed courage to talk to me? The Vampire King has faced down ancient enemies and political coups and assassination attempts without flinching, Erasmus said quietly. But the thought of you rejecting me was terrifying. Lily sipped her coffee to buy herself time to think. This was moving so fast, this impossible thing between them, and she knew she should be more cautious, should protect herself better. But there was something about Erasmus that called to her, something lonely and genuine beneath all that regal bearing. He made her laugh. He listened when she talked. He'd made grilled cheese in her kitchen like it was the most important thing he'd ever done. I don't want fancy dates, she said finally. I don't want you to try to impress me with money or power or any of that. If this is going to be something, it has to be real. I don't know how to be real anymore, Erasmus admitted. I've been playing the king for so long that I've forgotten who I am underneath. But when I'm with you, I remember. You make me want to try. She set down her coffee and crossed to him, looking up into his face. He was so tall, so impossibly beautiful, and there was something ancient in his eyes that should have been unsettling. Instead, she felt drawn to him, pulled by a connection she couldn't explain. Then try, she said. Erasmus cupped her face in his hands, cool palms against her warm skin, and leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Lily rose on her toes and met him halfway, and when their lips touched, she felt the world shift. The kiss was soft at first, careful, like he was afraid of breaking her. But Lily pressed closer, her hands sliding up his chest to tangle in his long white hair, and Erasmus made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss. He was controlled, restrained, clearly holding back enormous strength, but there was hunger underneath, desire that felt like it had been contained for far too long. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Erasmus rested his forehead against hers. Lily Reeves, he said, his voice rough, you are going to completely undo me. Good, she whispered, and kissed him again. They spent the rest of the day in her apartment, talking and laughing and stealing kisses between cups of coffee and the leftovers she'd lied about being bad. As sunset approached, Lily felt something like dread settling in her stomach. She didn't want him to leave, didn't want to go back to her regular life now that she'd glimpsed something extraordinary. Erasmus seemed to sense her mood. I'll come back, he promised, holding her close. Every night, if you'll have me. Your court can manage without me for a few hours each evening. I've been running things for 3 centuries. They'll survive. He tipped her chin up, making her meet his eyes. Unless you don't want me to. I want you to, Lily said, the honesty of it startling her. I really want you to. When full dark fell, Erasmus kissed her goodbye with a tenderness that made her ache, and then he was gone, moving too fast for her to track, leaving only the displaced air and the scent of him behind. Lily stood in her empty apartment, touching her lips, wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm already counting the hours until I see you again. Thank you for the grilled cheese and the laughter. Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be more than a crown. She saved the number, typed back. Same time tomorrow? The response was immediate. I'll bring better cheese. Lily laughed and fell back on her couch, staring at her ceiling, feeling like her entire world had shifted on its axis. She was dating a vampire. She was dating the Vampire King. It was insane and impossible and probably dangerous. She couldn't wait for tomorrow night. Erasmus came back the next evening, and the evening after that, and the one after that. He brought fancy cheese and good bread, and they made grilled cheese together while he told her about his day, the politics and power struggles translated into terms that made them sound almost mundane. Lily told him about the difficult customers at the gallery, about her other jobs, about her small life that felt larger when he was in it. 3 weeks into whatever this was, Lily came home from her shift at the gallery to find Erasmus already in her apartment, which should have been impossible since she hadn't given him a key. Breaking and entering is illegal, she said, dropping her bag on the floor. I apologize. I was concerned. He was pacing her small space like a caged animal, all restless energy. Something happened today, something that's going to complicate things. Lily's stomach dropped. What kind of something? My court knows about you. He stopped pacing and looked at her, and there was worry in his eyes, real fear. One of my advisors saw us together. By now, everyone in the night court will have heard that their king is involved with a human. Is that bad? It's unprecedented. Vampires and humans interact, certainly, but rarely romantically, and never at this level of court. He crossed to her, taking her hands. They're going to want to meet you, to assess you, and some of them are going to see you as a weakness they can exploit. Lily felt her heart start to race. Exploit how? By threatening you to control me, by using you as leverage in their political games. His grip tightened. I won't let that happen, Lily. I'll protect you with everything I have, but I need you to understand what you're stepping into. She should have been terrified. A sane person would have ended things right there, walked away before the danger became real. But Lily had spent her whole life playing it safe, making the practical choice. And where had it gotten her? To a studio apartment and 3 jobs and a life that felt like slowly drowning. Erasmus made her feel alive. He made her laugh. He looked at her like she was precious, like she mattered, and maybe that was worth the risk. Then I'll meet them, she said. Lily, I'm serious. If your court wants to assess me, let them. I'm not going to hide. She squeezed his hands. You said this was real. Real means not running when things get complicated. Something shifted in his expression, pride and fear and love all tangled together. You're extraordinary. I'm stubborn. That too. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. The formal presentation will be in 3 days. I'll have someone bring you appropriate clothing. The court is very traditional about dress. What counts as appropriate? Think Gothic ballroom. Elegant but not ostentatious. You're being presented as my companion, not a supplicant. He pulled back to look at her. And Lily, no matter what happens, no matter what they say, remember that you are not beneath them. You are mine, and I am the king, and that makes you untouchable. The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered her, but instead, it sent heat curling through her stomach. Yours? If you'll have me. His voice dropped lower, intimate. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I've lived for over 6 centuries, and I've never felt like this. You make me want to be more than a king. You make me want to be real. Lily reached up and pulled him down into a kiss, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. When they broke apart, she whispered, I'm yours, and you're mine. We'll figure out the rest. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. A woman named Serafina, who introduced herself as one of Erasmus's most trusted courtiers, arrived at Lily's apartment with an entire wardrobe of dresses. She was vampire too, with the same pale skin and regal bearing, though her hair was black instead of white. "The king has asked me to assist you," Serafina said, her accent placing her somewhere in Eastern Europe. "The night court can be overwhelming for humans. I'm to help you navigate it." "Are you here to tell me I'm not good enough for him?" Lily asked bluntly. Serafina's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "I'm here to tell you that Erasmus Falomir has been a lonely king for 300 years, and in the past 3 weeks I've seen him smile more than in the previous century. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." They went through the dresses, Serafina explaining the subtle politics of color and cut in vampire court fashion. Lily ended up choosing a deep burgundy gown that was elegant without being overly ornate, the kind of thing that wouldn't make her feel like she was wearing a costume. "The court will test you," Serafina warned as she helped Lily with her hair on the night of the presentation. "They'll try to fluster you to make you seem unsuitable. Don't let them see fear." "What if I am afraid?" "Then pretend you're not." Serafina met her eyes in the mirror. "You're walking in as the companion of the most powerful vampire in the Western Hemisphere. That gives you more protection than you realize. Use it." When Erasmus came to collect her, he stopped dead in the doorway, staring. "Is it wrong?" Lily asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You're breathtaking." He crossed to her, taking her hands and kissing them. He was dressed in formal court attire himself, all black and silver, his white hair bound back with a silver clasp. He looked every inch the king, powerful and untouchable, but when he looked at her, his expression softened into something tender. "Are you ready?" "Absolutely not." "Good. Neither was I the first time." He offered her his arm. "Stay close to me. Don't let them intimidate you. And remember, you're the one who taught the Vampire King how to make grilled cheese. You've already conquered something far more difficult than court politics." The entrance to the night court was hidden beneath an abandoned subway station, glamored so humans would unconsciously avoid it. Erasmus led her down stairs that seemed to go on forever, descending deep into the earth, and with each step Lily felt the air grow cooler, heavier with age and power. The palace, when they finally reached it, was unlike anything she'd imagined. It was a vast network of chambers carved from living stone, lit by thousands of candles and strange glowing crystals that cast everything in ethereal light. The architecture was Gothic and ancient, all soaring ceilings and elegant arches, beautiful and unsettling in equal measure. Vampires filled the halls, all of them pale and lovely and watching her with undisguised curiosity. Lily kept her chin up and her hand on Erasmus's arm, refusing to show the fear thrumming through her veins. The throne room was enormous, the ceiling lost in shadows overhead. A throne carved from black stone sat at the far end, and arranged throughout the space were easily 100 vampires, all dressed in finery that made Lily's borrowed gown seem simple by comparison. Erasmus led her to the center of the room and turned to face his court. "I present Lily Reeves," he announced, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. "She is under my personal protection. Any who would harm her answers to me." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with tension. Then a vampire stepped forward from the crowd, male, with white hair like Erasmus, but features that were sharper, crueler. "A human, Your Majesty. Surely this is a jest." "I don't jest about such things, Constantine." Erasmus's voice was cool, controlled. "Lily is my companion. You will treat her with the respect due to that position." Constantine's smile was all teeth. "Of course, Your Majesty. We would never question your judgment, though one must wonder what this human could possibly offer our king that the court cannot provide." "She offers me honesty," Erasmus said quietly. "Something in rather short supply here." There were murmurs at that, vampires whispering among themselves. Lily felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, judging, assessing, trying to find her weak points. A female vampire glided forward, her movements predatory. "Tell me, Miss Reeves, what do you know of our world, our laws, our customs?" "Not much," Lily admitted, refusing to lie. "But I'm learning." "How charming." "The king's pet is educable." The vampire's smile was sharp. "And what makes you think you belong here, among beings who have walked this earth for centuries?" I don't think I belong here, Lily said clearly, but I belong with Erasmus. If that means learning to navigate your world, then that's what I'll do. The vampire's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, another voice cut through the room. She's a liability. The speaker was a vampire seated on a chair, only slightly less grand than the throne, clearly someone of importance. He stood and the crowd parted for him. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but we must speak plainly. Humans are fragile. They die easily. You're exposing yourself to grief and giving our enemies a clear target. I'm aware of the risks, Victor. Erasmus's voice was hard. Are you? Because it seems to me you're thinking with your heart rather than your head. Victor moved closer, his gaze fixed on Lily with something that might have been pity. She'll age, she'll sicken, she'll die, and you'll have perhaps 50 years with her if you're lucky. Is that worth destabilizing the court? Lily felt something cold settle in her stomach. She hadn't thought about that, not really. The math of mortality, the way her human lifespan must look to beings who measured time in centuries. But Erasmus stepped in front of her, putting himself between her and Victor. My relationship with Lily is not up for debate. She is mine, I am hers, and the court will accept that, or answer to me. We're not questioning your right to choose, Your Majesty. This, from another vampire, female, with hair the color of blood. But surely you understand our concern. The court needs stability. A king who is distracted by human affairs cannot effectively rule. I've ruled effectively for 300 years. I think I can manage a few more. Erasmus's voice was deadly calm. This discussion is over. Is it? Constantine again, moving to stand beside Victor. Your Majesty, we all saw what happened to the European court when their king became involved with a human. The distraction nearly cost them everything. I am not the European king. No, you're better than him, stronger, wiser. Constantine's voice was smooth, persuasive. Which is why this is so concerning. You've always put the court first, but now you're making decisions based on emotion, on fleeting human connection. It makes you vulnerable. Lily felt Erasmus tense beside her, felt the power rolling off him in waves. I will say this once more, and I suggest you all listen carefully. Lily is not a weakness. She does not make me vulnerable. If anything, she reminds me what I'm protecting when I make the hard choices you seem to think I'm neglecting. He turned to face the court, and there was something magnificent about him, terrible and beautiful. I am still your king. I still hold this court together, and I will continue to do so with Lily at my side. If that's unacceptable to any of you, you're welcome to challenge me for the throne. The silence that fell was absolute. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Finally, Victor bowed his head. No one questions your right to rule, Your Majesty. We simply worry for you. Your concern is noted. Erasmus's tone made it clear the matter was closed. Now, unless there's other business, this audience is concluded. The court began to disperse, vampires drifting away in small groups, still whispering. Lily stayed close to Erasmus as he led her out of the throne room and through a series of corridors to a private chamber, lavishly appointed with furniture that looked centuries old. The moment the door closed behind them, Erasmus pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I'm sorry, he said into her hair. I'm so sorry they treated you like that. They're afraid, Lily said, her voice muffled against his chest. They think I'm going to hurt you. They think you make me weak. Do I? He pulled back, framing her face with his hands. You make me strong. You make me remember why I wanted to be king in the first place, what I was trying to protect. But they're not entirely wrong about the risks. Lily felt her throat tighten. The whole aging and dying thing. There are ways around that, ways to extend your life or even make you immortal if you wanted. He said it carefully, watching her reaction. But those are choices for later, conversations we need to have when we've had more time. Right now, I just need you to know that I've thought about all of this, the mortality, the danger, the politics, and you're still worth it. She wanted to say something profound, something that would match the weight of what he was offering. But what came out was, I taught you to make grilled cheese, and now your entire court is questioning your judgment. Erasmus blinked, then started to laugh, that deep, genuine sound she loved. When you put it that way, it does seem a bit ridiculous. It's very ridiculous. This whole thing is ridiculous. Lily found herself laughing too, the tension of the evening breaking. I'm a gallery assistant who can barely pay rent, and you're a 600-year-old vampire king, and we're hiding in your palace because your court doesn't approve of you slumming it with humans. I'm not slumming, Erasmus said, still laughing. I'm living. They stayed in the palace that night, Erasmus showing her his private chambers, the vast library he'd collected over centuries, the gardens that somehow grew underground, lit by the same glowing crystals. It was beautiful and strange and completely otherworldly, and Lily felt increasingly out of place among all the ancient grandeur. I don't belong here, she said finally, standing in his bedroom, which was larger than her entire apartment. Erasmus, look at this place. Look at your life. I'm never going to fit into this world. I don't want you to fit into this world. He came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. I want you to pull me out of it. Remind me that there's more to existence than court politics and power games. Your court doesn't see it that way. My court will adjust. But there was uncertainty in his voice now, a crack in his confidence. Over the next few weeks, Lily tried to do exactly what Erasmus wanted, to exist in both worlds. But it was harder than she'd imagined. She still worked her jobs during the day, still lived in her small apartment, but now she spent her nights in the underground palace, learning vampire etiquette and trying to navigate politics she barely understood. The court was polite to her face, but she heard the whispers, saw the looks. She was the human, the novelty, the king's strange fixation that would surely pass once he came to his senses. Erasmus tried to shield her from the worst of it, but he was increasingly pulled into court business, dealing with challenges to his authority that hadn't existed before. Vampires who had accepted his rule for centuries were suddenly questioning his decisions, using his relationship with Lily as proof that he was no longer fit to lead. They're testing you, Serafina explained one evening, finding Lily alone in the library. They want to see if you'll break under the pressure, if you'll leave him. I'm not going to leave him. Good, because if you do, it will destroy him. Serafina sat down across from her. I've known Erasmus for 200 years. I've never seen him like this, so open, so vulnerable. You've given him something precious. Don't take it away because his court is full of jealous fools. But the pressure kept building. A week later, during a formal court dinner that Lily had been required to attend, Constantine stood and made a formal challenge. Your Majesty, I invoke the right of questioning. The court has become unstable under your recent leadership. Your focus is divided. Your decisions are compromised by human emotion. I challenge your fitness to rule. The room went silent. Lily felt ice flood her veins. This was it, the thing they'd all been waiting for. The court turning on Erasmus because of her. Erasmus stood slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You challenge me, Constantine? I challenge your judgment, Your Majesty. Not your right to rule, but your current capacity to do so effectively. Constantine's voice was smooth, reasonable. Step back from the throne temporarily. Take time to sort out your personal affairs. Let the council govern until you're ready to return with full focus. And if I refuse? Then I'm forced to call for a vote of confidence. The court will decide whether you're still capable of leading us. Lily watched Erasmus's face, saw the fury and hurt warring there. This was his court, vampires he'd protected and led for centuries, and they were turning on him because he'd dared to care about something beyond the throne. Vote then, Erasmus said coldly. Let the court decide. What followed was the most excruciating hour of Lily's life. Vampire after vampire stood to voice their opinion, most of them carefully worded criticisms disguised as concern. They worried about his distraction. They questioned his recent decisions. They pointed to the challenges from rival courts who saw the king's human companion as a weakness to exploit. A few spoke in his defense, Serafina among them, arguing that Erasmus had earned the right to personal happiness, that his centuries of service should count for something. But they were outnumbered. When the vote was finally called, it was close, but the result was devastating. The court had no confidence in Erasmus's current fitness to rule. He was being asked to step down temporarily, to choose between the crown and the human. Erasmus stood in the center of the throne room, surrounded by his court, and Lily saw something break in his eyes. This was his life, his identity, the purpose he'd served for 300 years, and they were taking it from him because he'd fallen in love. He looked at her across the room, and she saw the question there, the choice he was being forced to make. Lily made the decision for him. She stood, her voice carrying through the vast space. "Your Majesty, I think it's best if I leave the court." "Lily, no. You're a king, Erasmus. These people need you, even if they're too stupid to see what they have." She forced herself to smile, to sound calm even though her heart was shattering. "I was never going to fit here anyway. It's better this way." She walked out before he could stop her, before she could see his face and lose her resolve. Serafina caught up with her in the corridor, gripping her arm. "What are you doing?" the vampire hissed. "What I should have done weeks ago, letting him be what he needs to be." Lily pulled her arm free. "Take care of him, Serafina." She made it back to her apartment somehow, riding the subway in her borrowed court dress, getting strange looks from the few other passengers. When she finally closed her door behind her, she collapsed on the couch and let herself cry. Her phone rang immediately. Erasmus. She didn't answer. It rang again and again, and finally she turned it off, unable to bear hearing his voice. 3 days passed. 3 days of Lily going through the motions of her regular life, working her shifts, coming home to her empty apartment, trying to pretend her heart wasn't broken. She didn't turn her phone back on. She didn't check her messages. She knew if she heard from him, she'd give in, and this had to be a clean break. On the 4th night, there was a knock at her door. She knew who it was before she opened it. Erasmus stood in her hallway, and he looked terrible. His hair loose and disheveled, his clothes rumpled, dark circles under his eyes that she'd never seen before. "You look like hell," she said. "I haven't fed, haven't slept, haven't done anything but try to figure out how to fix this." He looked at her with desperate eyes. "Lily, please, let me explain." She should have closed the door, should have protected herself, but she stepped aside and let him in, unable to do anything else. Erasmus stood in her small apartment, this space where they'd been happy, and said, "I abdicated." Lily's world tilted. "You what?" "I stepped down, officially, permanently." He said it calmly, but she could see the devastation underneath. "I gave the throne to Victor. He'll be a good king, fair and just. The court is already stabilizing under his leadership." Erasmus, No, you can't. That's not what I wanted. You wanted me to choose the crown over you. But Lily, the crown means nothing without you." He crossed to her, taking her hands. "I've been king for 300 years. I've done my duty, served my court, made the hard choices. And for what? To sit on a throne in the darkness, surrounded by people who see me as a position rather than a person? They need you. They need a king. Victor will give them that, but I need you." His grip tightened. "These past 3 days have been the longest of my very long life." I kept thinking about that first night. Making grilled cheese in your kitchen, laughing until my sides hurt. That was the first time in centuries I felt real. The first time I felt like more than a crown. Lily felt tears streaming down her face. "You gave up everything for me. I gave up a job for a life. There's a difference." He cupped her face, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "I'm still a vampire, still powerful, still wealthy enough that we'll never want for anything. But I'm no longer bound to the court, no longer trapped in politics and power games. I'm free, Lily, free to be with you, to build something real." "What if you regret it?" she whispered. "What if you wake up in 100 years and realize you threw away your throne for a human who's going to age and die? Then we'll figure it out. Together." He leaned his forehead against hers. "I love you, Lily Reeves. I love your small apartment and your terrible jobs and the way you laugh when I burn the grilled cheese. I love that you see me, not the king, just me. And I would rather have 50 years of that than 500 more years on a throne without you." She kissed him, pulling him close, tasting salt and desperation and love. "I love you too," she said against his lips. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good. Terror is healthy." He smiled, and it was real, unguarded. Now, I believe I owe you several days' worth of grilled cheese. I've been practicing." They made grilled cheese in her tiny kitchen, falling back into the rhythm they had established, and Lily felt the pieces of her heart start to come back together. Erasmus told her about the abdication ceremony, the shock of the court, Victor's solemn acceptance of the crown. He told her about Serafina's reaction, how she'd hugged him and told him he was an idiot, and she was proud of him all at once. "What happens now?" Lily asked, sitting on the counter while he cooked. "Now, we figure out how to build a life together. I have estates, properties around the world. We can go anywhere, do anything. Or we can stay here, in your studio apartment, and keep making grilled cheese." He flipped the sandwich perfectly, golden brown on both sides. "I don't care where we are, as long as we're together. The court won't come after us? Victor has already issued a decree. I'm under protection as the former king, and you're under protection as my companion. We're off limits." He plated the sandwich and handed her half. "We're safe, Lily. We can just be." Over the next few months, they did exactly that. Erasmus helped Lily quit her exhausting jobs, set her up with a scholarship to finish her degree in art history. They moved to a bigger apartment, nothing palatial, but comfortable, with a real kitchen and windows that let in sunlight during the day. Erasmus slept through those hours, still bound by his vampire nature, but the evenings were theirs. They traveled, Erasmus showing her the world he'd seen over centuries. They spent a month in Paris, 2 weeks in Tokyo, a magical week in a castle in Scotland that Erasmus had apparently won in a card game 200 years ago. But they always came back to the apartment, to their small domestic life. Lily started working at a museum, a position Erasmus had helped her get through connections, but one she'd earned through her own knowledge and passion. She loved it, loved spending her days surrounded by art and history, loved coming home to tell Erasmus about the new exhibit she was curating. They made grilled cheese at least once a week, a tradition they both protected fiercely. Sometimes Erasmus would experiment, adding tomatoes or bacon, once trying to make it with fancy French cheese that had cost more than Lily used to make in a week. It was terrible, and they'd laughed until they cried. "I don't miss it," Erasmus said one evening, 2 years after his abdication. They were on the couch, Lily curled against his side, watching a movie she'd been trying to get him to appreciate. "The court, the throne, any of it. Just in case you were wondering." "I wasn't, but good to know. I want you to be sure. I want you to know that I chose this, chose you, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." Lily turned to look at him, this impossible man who'd given up a kingdom for her. "I'm sure. Are you?" "I've never been more sure of anything in 645 years. He kissed her temple. "Though I do have a question." "What's that?" "Marry me." Lily sat up, staring at him. That wasn't a question. That was a command. "Apologies. Old habits." Erasmus reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple and elegant, a single diamond set in platinum. "Lily Reeves, love of my impossibly long life, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" She looked at the ring, at his hopeful face, at the life they'd built together in this small apartment with its real kitchen and its walls covered in art prints she'd brought home from the museum. She thought about the vampire king who'd learned to make grilled cheese, who'd abdicated his throne, who'd chosen her over everything. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." The ring fit perfectly. Of course it did. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony, just a handful of friends and Lily's mother, who'd been surprisingly accepting of her daughter's vampire boyfriend once she'd gotten over the initial shock. Serafina came, Victor sent his official blessing, and a few other vampires from the old court attended, the ones who'd been genuine friends rather than political allies. It was small and simple and perfect, exactly what they both wanted. They exchanged vows in the garden of the Scottish castle under a moon that seemed impossibly bright, and when Erasmus kissed her as his wife, Lily felt like the luckiest person alive. 5 years after that first night of burnt grilled cheese, Lily came home from the museum to find Erasmus in the kitchen, looking nervous in a way she rarely saw. "What's wrong?" she asked, dropping her bag. "Nothing's wrong. I have something I want to discuss with you." He guided her to the couch, sitting down beside her. "You're 33 now. Thanks for the reminder." You're still young by human standards, but we need to talk about the future, about what happens when you start to age and I don't. He took her hands. I've been researching options. There are ways to extend your life significantly, or to turn you completely if you want, but they're not without risk, and they're not decisions to make lightly. Lily had known this conversation was coming. They'd danced around it for years, but it was time to face it directly. What are the options? He explained them carefully. Blood sharing could extend her life, slow her aging, but wouldn't make her immortal. A full turning would make her vampire, immortal, and powerful. But she'd lose the sunlight, lose the ability to eat regular food, become something fundamentally different from what she was. What do you want me to do? She asked when he'd finished. I want you to choose what makes you happy. If you want to live a normal human lifespan, I'll treasure every moment we have. If you want to extend it, we'll do that. If you want to become vampire, I'll guide you through the transition. His voice was steady, but she could see the fear underneath. But I need you to choose for yourself, not for me. Lily thought about it, really thought about it. She loved her life, loved the sunlight and the taste of food and the warmth of being human. But she also loved Erasmus, loved the life they'd built, and the thought of leaving him alone after just a few more decades was unbearable. I want more time, she said finally. Not immortality, not yet. I'm not ready to give up being human, but I want more time with you. Relief flooded his face. Then we'll do the blood sharing. It's not permanent. We'd need to renew it periodically, but it will give us centuries together. Enough time to really decide about forever. They started the process the next week, Erasmus feeding her small amounts of his blood, carefully monitored to ensure her body adapted properly. It was strange at first, feeling the changes, the way her senses sharpened and her strength increased. She didn't become vampire, but she became something more than human, something in between. The aging slowed dramatically. By the time another 5 years had passed, Lily looked exactly the same as she had at 33, and the doctors Erasmus had her see confirmed that her cellular aging had slowed to a fraction of its normal rate. We'll have at least 500 years at this rate, Erasmus said, reading the reports. Probably more, enough time to see the world change a dozen times over, enough time to make so much grilled cheese we get sick of it. I could never get sick of grilled cheese, Lily said, wrapping her arms around him. Or of you. They settled into their new reality, this extended life they'd chosen. Lily continued working at the museum, eventually becoming a curator, then a director. Erasmus found new purposes, funding art programs and historical preservation projects, using his wealth and knowledge to protect the things that mattered. They moved occasionally, when Lily's slowed aging started to become noticeable, always finding new cities to explore, new communities to join. But wherever they went, they brought their traditions with them. The weekly grilled cheese, the quiet evenings curled up together, the laughter that had started it all. 20 years after that first burnt sandwich, they were back in their original city, living in a brownstone this time, with a real kitchen that Erasmus had insisted on, even though they still mostly made simple meals. Lily was working on a major exhibition at the museum. Erasmus was writing a book on vampire history from an insider's perspective, and they were happy. Do you ever regret it? Lily asked one evening, watching him make grilled cheese with the practiced ease of 2 decades of experience. Giving up the crown? Erasmus looked up from the stove, and the smile he gave her was answer enough. Not even for a second. That was someone else's life. This is mine. He plated the sandwiches, perfectly golden on both sides, the cheese melted just right, and brought them to the small table by the window where they always ate. They sat across from each other, the city lights twinkling outside, and Lily felt the same rush of contentment she'd felt that very first night. I love you, she said. I love you too. Erasmus reached across the table to take her hand. Thank you for teaching me how to make grilled cheese. Thank you for laughing at me when I burnt it. Thank you for choosing this life with me. Thank you for giving up a kingdom because I didn't want a fancy date. They ate their grilled cheese and talked about everything and nothing, their voices filling the warm kitchen, and somewhere in a palace deep underground, a vampire court went about its business without them. Victor ruled wisely and well, the court had stabilized, and the former king who'd abdicated for love had become something of a legend among vampires, a cautionary tale or an inspiration depending on who was telling it. But Erasmus Falomir didn't think about any of that. He was too busy laughing at something Lily had said, too focused on this moment, this meal, this life he'd chosen. The Vampire King had made grilled cheese and laughed for hours, and in doing so, he'd found something more precious than any crown. A love that was real, deep, and entirely his own. 30 years later, they were still making grilled cheese. 50 years later, they'd perfected it, though Erasmus still occasionally burnt it on purpose just to make Lily laugh. A century after that first night, they renewed the blood bond. Lily still not ready for full immortality, but grateful for the extended time. They watched the world change around them, technology advancing, society shifting, but their small traditions remained constant. Every week, grilled cheese, every night, coming home to each other, every day, choosing love over everything else. "You know what I realized?" Lily said one evening. They'd been together for 150 years and were living in a cottage in New Zealand, surrounded by mountains and sheep and blessed quiet. "What's that?" Erasmus asked, sliding a perfect grilled cheese onto her plate. "I never did want a fancy date. I just wanted this. Someone who'd meet me where I was, who'd be real with me, who'd burn grilled cheese and laugh about it." She looked at him. This man who'd been a king and had chosen to be simply hers instead. "I wanted you, exactly as you are." Erasmus came around the table and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with the passion of someone who'd loved her for over a century and would love her for centuries more. "And I wanted you, exactly as you are. The woman who told a vampire king that rooftop restaurants weren't impressive and demanded grilled cheese instead. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," he corrected. "The best was saying yes when I proposed." They argued about it playfully, the way they'd argued about 1,000 small things over the decades, comfortable in their knowledge of each other. Outside, the New Zealand sun was setting, painting the mountains in gold and purple, and inside their small cottage, a former vampire king and his extended life human wife ate grilled cheese and laughed like they'd been laughing since that very first night. The crown sat in a museum somewhere, labeled as a historical artifact from a court that no longer existed in its old form. But the love between Erasmus and Lily continued, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, built on a foundation of burnt bread and honest laughter and the simple joy of being exactly who they were, together. And every week, without fail, they made grilled cheese.